We pay in the rent that we pay for our flats and our homes. We pay in the mortgages that we pay for our homes. We pay, our employers pay for the premises that they need. And we all pay twice. We pay once for the location value of where we want to live or where we work. And we pay again in taxes that are a burden on our economy. And there must be a better system, and I think that there is a better system. I better explain. In the UK, we have a mythical, I believe, villain, I suppose you might say, a man who used to rob from rich people in the Middle Ages with a bow and an arrow. And the money he took, he used to give to the poor people in the Middle Ages. And he was known as Robin Hood. He robbed from the rich and he gave it to the poor. And this next little story I call Hood Robin. It's Robin Hood in reverse. The picture is of our intercity bus station that my organisation I used to work for, Transport for London, operated. And people travel intercity by bus or by coach. And ask yourself, who travels intercity by bus? I would argue that richer people will fly intercity. I'm going to do it next month in China. I'm flying from Guilin down to Hong Kong. They go by train. They go by car. It is the poorest travellers who travel by bus or by coach. It's much slower. You have to stop at various places, blah-de-blah. Now, our coach station is the terminus in London for those journeys. And 1/3 of the land at the coach station is owned by a company called Grosvenor Estates. They own 1/3. And Transport for London pays a rent of £230,000 a year to Grosvenor Estates. And where do they get the money from? Well, they get the money from the coach companies. Every bus that comes in has to pay a fee to Transport for London for the use of the coach station. And where does the coach company get the money from to pay TfL? They get the money from the passengers. Who owns Grosvenor Estates? Grosvenor Estates is owned by the Duke of Westminster, an aristocratic landowner whose family have owned the land in London, in Mayfair, Belgravia, Victoria, where this is based, for hundreds of years. And so we have, I was going to say the absurdity, but no, the obscenity of the poorest travellers in the country subsidising the richest landowner in the country to the tune of £230,000 a year. Now, if we had a land value tax, then the position would be different. We wouldn't need to be taxing those poor travellers. We wouldn't need to be rewarding the Duke of Westminster with increased land wealth. We would be taxing him for the wealth he hasn't created, the land, but he has inherited. So LVT helps avoid urban sprawl. Why do we want to collect land rent? And land value tax, as we've heard at this conference, is only one name for it. It was also called a canon earlier on in Spanish. Not quite the same meaning in English, but it would be nice if we could actually think of a better name, because we call it a tax, but it's collecting the natural resource. Land is a natural resource. We don't have to make it. It's been made for us to enjoy. Its value is created by the whole community. Everybody creates land value. And more important still, landowners do not create land value. Expenditure on public and indeed on private services usually leads to an increase in land values. In my country, the planning process adds to land values. It gives a windfall gain. And we know that taxes on labour and capital act as a drag anchor on the economy. I could talk for half an hour on why we want to avoid taxes on labour and capital. Land value is one way to collect land rent. I believe it is a fair way of paying for public services. Yes, passengers on public transport get the benefit of the journey. But if at each end they're going to have to pay more rent, the landowner also gets the benefit of the journey. Let's charge the landowner the rent of the land, and let's reduce the fares on the buses and trains so more people use buses and trains. That's one lesson I learned here. We went to Tigray last weekend, and I was amazed. We got change from 6 pesos for a return journey for 2 of us to Tigray. I wish we had fare levels on our trains like you've obviously got on yours. Mind you, I would prefer to have upholstery on the seat of the train rather than seats that are torn apart. Land value tax encourages new capital investment. If a rich person cannot invest in land which doesn't produce any wealth, they'll invest it in new computers in factories, new vehicles on the railway, new vehicles on the roads. They'll invest in production. And we will all become richer. Our workers will have more machinery at their elbow and become more productive. We will all become richer. It's like changing a hose pipe of pesos from going down a drain into pushing those pesos towards entrepreneurs and people that are going to make good use of the wealth to create more wealth. It promotes the use of empty sites. I've said too much on that. It helps prevent urban sprawl. It cannot be avoided. I'm just reading a book called Treasure Islands. It's all about offshore money scams. How the rich people don't pay our taxes. They avoid them through transfer pricing, legal things it's talking about. You know, on top of that, there's illegal things. But legally, they are able through multinational companies avoid paying our taxes. You can't take your piece of land to the Cayman Islands. You can't avoid paying the land value tax. Therefore, it's cheap to collect and it's unavoidable. It would also provide automatic compensation. If I was going to build a nuclear power station outside your front door, the value of your home would collapse. With a land value tax, the good news is that you will get a rebate, a cheque from the government for a lower land value tax bill because your land has been reduced. I just hope that the cheque arrives before you die from leukemia from the nuclear power station. It facilitates lower interest rates. If you have more money going into the real economy, the price of borrowing that money becomes lower. And therefore, businesses that can't even get started today because they can't afford to borrow money in the future under LVT would be able to borrow the money. And my friend here, Fred Harrison, has a book outside in Spanish called Boom and Bust, which shows quite clearly how the property cycle, the business cycle, the depression we're currently in worldwide is caused by speculation in land. There's overseas experience of land value capture, not always LVT, But in Denmark, Australia, parts of Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Taiwan, United States, parts of the United States and parts of Canada, they collect some local revenue through a land value tax. And it works. Hong Kong, it works. There's been a 19% reduction in unemployment. And we heard yesterday, was it, about how crime and unemployment are so correlated. Harrisburg is the proof of that. Crime has dropped 58%. What the Mayor, Stephen Reed Jr., says about crime and his city, he's no longer the mayor now, but he was mayor for 25 years, he says crime tends to be committed by poor people with no money in their pockets, plenty of free time on their hands, living in rundown areas where there is no community pride. He says his land tax created jobs. It put some money into workers' pockets. It robbed them of their free time. When they came home from work, they were too tired to go out and rob their neighbours. They sunk in front of the telly and ate their evening meal. And as you see, the crime rate dropped by 58%. And the landowners in the area tarted up the buildings, put on a new lick of paint, repaired the windows because they were looking for tenants and people to buy their properties because they were paying the land tax. And by doing that, it created a new civic pride. And you have to have pride in yourself if you're going to live in a community without crime. People who commit crime have got no self-regard, no self-esteem. Harrisburg was the bottom of United States cities. It's now at the top of the list. It's currently facing a particular problem. I won't go into details. And what I tell politicians, and I'm a local politician myself for many years, Mayor Stephen Reed was elected 1982, I'll have to amend that, until about 2010. He was re-elected time and time again. It's a popular policy. Philosophers only interpret the world. The point is to change it. Our friend Karl Marx said that, but I think it's a clarion call for all of us. We've attended this week a wonderful conference. We've heard the theory. We've heard the philosophers. Now let's roll up our sleeves, go out there, and let's change this world we live in. Thank you.